They say the moon goddess chooses for us, but in the silver mane pack, the goddess only smiles on the strong. For an Omega like me, the mating ceremony wasn't a promise of love, it was a public execution of my dignity. My grandmother used to tell me that every wolf has their moment, that fate works in mysterious ways. But when you're blamed for a tragedy you didn't cause, when you're the pariah no alpha would ever claim, you learn that fate is just another word for cruelty. And tonight, in the torchlit shadows of the Great Hall, I would discover that sometimes destiny doesn't arrive as salvation, it arrives as a bargain you never asked to make. The Great Hall of the Silver Mane Pack stretched before me like the maw of some ancient beast, all stone and shadow and flickering firelight. Iron chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, their flames casting restless shadows across walls carved with the history of a pack I'd never truly belonged to. The scent of roasted venison and mulled cider mixed with something sharper, the predatory musk of unmated alphas, their anticipation thick enough to taste. Long tables groaned under platters of food that no one was eating yet. This wasn't about the feast. It was about the claiming, the bonding, the ancient ritual that would pair the pack's finest unmated wolves and strengthen bloodlines for another generation. Everyone who mattered wore their finest tonight. Silk and leather, furs and jewels, each unmated female a peacock on display. Everyone except me. I stood near the far wall, partially hidden behind one of the massive stone pillars that held up the hall's roof, where the torchlight didn't quite penetrate the gloom. My dress was dark teal, simple, borrowed from a cousin who'd pitied me enough to lend it. I'd braided my auburn hair tight against my scalp, the way my mother had taught me before she died, before everything fell apart. Before the fire that killed my father and 2 council members, the fire they blamed on me, though I was only 12 and nowhere near the Elder's Lodge when it happened. 10 years later, I was still paying for a crime I didn't commit. Did you hear Alpha Torsten brought his entire entourage from the Northern Ridge? A voice drifted from the nearest table, sharp with excitement. I didn't need to look to know it was Sarah, the Beta Commander's daughter. 3 unmated alphas, all looking for strong bloodlines. Well, they won't find one with her. Another voice, dripping with disdain. Mira, probably. Can you imagine? Maeve Silverlight, the cursed Omega. What alpha in his right mind would? A burst of laughter cut off the rest, but I'd heard enough. I'd heard it all before. For ceremonies, for years of standing in the shadows while others were chosen, celebrated, bonded. For years of being invisible except when someone needed a target for their contempt. Maeve. I turned to find Elder Kalen, the pack's oldest healer, studying me with eyes that had witnessed 70 winters. His weathered face held the same expression it always did at these ceremonies, pity mixed with regret. You shouldn't isolate yourself back here, he said quietly. It only makes it worse. I'm fine here, Elder. I managed what I hoped was a convincing smile. Better view of the ceremony, anyway. We both knew it was a lie. The old man sighed, his hand briefly touching my shoulder before he moved on to greet other pack members. I watched him go, then turned my attention to the raised dais at the hall's far end. Alpha Theron Silvermane stood there, the pack's aging leader, his silver hair matching the name we all bore. At 65, he still commanded the room with nothing more than his presence. Tonight, he would oversee the ceremony, bless the bonds, ensure tradition was honored. Brothers and sisters of Silvermane, his voice rolled across the great hall like distant thunder, silencing every conversation. Tonight, beneath the hunter's moon, we gather for our most sacred rite. The mating ceremony binds our pack, fortifies our bloodlines, and ensures our strength endures for generations yet unborn. I'd heard this speech every year since I turned 18. The words were burned into my memory. When your name is called, step forward. Trust in the moon goddess. Trust in our traditions. The worthy will be chosen. The ceremony began. One by one, names rang out across the hall. One by one, unmated females stepped onto the dais and alphas, confident, powerful, desirable, strode forward to claim them. The air shimmered with each bond forming, that electric snap of recognition that I'd only ever witnessed from a distance. Sarah was chosen first, paired with one of the Northern Ridge Alphas. The crowd erupted in cheers. Mira went third, claimed by a visiting alpha from the Iron Peak territory. More celebration, more joy. I counted 19 successful pairings before the pool of unmated females dwindled to almost nothing. My stomach twisted tighter with each name that wasn't mine. Maybe this year, Alpha Theron would forget to call me entirely. Maybe I could slip out before. Maeve Silverlight. The hall fell silent. Every head turned. Every eye found me in my shadowed corner, and I felt the weight of their judgment like a physical thing. The cursed Omega. The girl who brought death wherever she went. What alpha would ever want that? I forced myself to move, to step out from behind the pillar and walk toward the dais. My legs felt like stone. The distance seemed impossible, and yet somehow I crossed it, each step echoing in the terrible quiet. I climbed the 3 stairs to the platform and stood there alone, exposed under the scrutiny of the entire pack. Alpha Theron wouldn't meet my eyes. Seconds crawled past. 10. 20. 30. No alpha moved. No one stepped forward. The silence transformed from expectant to uncomfortable to pitying. I could feel them all thinking the same thing. Of course, no one wants her. 5th year in a row. How pathetic. I was about to step down, to retreat back into my shadows and pretend this humiliation hadn't happened, when the great iron-bound doors of the hall burst open. The sound was like a thunderclap. Cold wind rushed in, making the torches gutter and dance. Every wolf in the hall tensed, hands moving to weapons that weren't there, instincts flaring at the unexpected intrusion. A figure filled the doorway, so massive he had to duck beneath the frame. Aaron Silvermane. The whispers started immediately, a susurrus of shock rippling through the crowd. The Alpha of Alphas, leader of the formidable Silvermane's stronghold in the northern reaches, hadn't attended a mating ceremony in over a decade. He was a legend, 7 feet of sculpted muscle and barely contained violence, with dark hair that fell past his shoulders and a beard that couldn't hide the brutal angles of his face. Scars marked his exposed arms, each one a story of survival, of dominance, of victory. He strode into the hall like he owned it, like every stone and shadow belonged to him. Warriors twice my size stepped aside without thinking. The crowd parted like water around a stone. And his eyes, pale gray, cold as a winter storm, locked onto mine. He walked forward. Every step purposeful. Every movement predatory. He didn't stop at the edge of the crowd like the other alphas had. He walked straight to the dais, climbed the stairs, and stood before me, towering, overwhelming, impossible to look away from. Then he raised one massive hand and pointed directly at me. Here she is, his voice boomed across the hall, deep and absolute. My mate. The world tilted. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered a prayer. Alpha Theron stared at Aaron like he'd lost his mind. And I, Maeve Silverlight, the cursed Omega who'd never been chosen, never been wanted, never been anything but invisible. I was claimed by the most dangerous alpha in 3 territories. My nightmare had just begun. Thank you for sticking around with me, my wonderful story family. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Chapter 1. Aaron didn't wait for Alpha Theron's blessing. He didn't ask for the pack's approval or follow any of the traditional bonding rituals that should have followed his claim. He simply turned, his hand closing around my wrist like an iron shackle, and pulled me off the dais. Wait, I stumbled, my voice lost in the chaos erupting behind us. The hall had exploded into confused shouts and frantic whispers. Alpha Theron was calling after us, demanding explanations, but Aaron moved through the crowd like a force of nature, unstoppable and unyielding. He dragged me through a side door I'd never noticed before, down a corridor lit by guttering torches, and finally into a small antechamber that smelled of old leather and smoke. Only then did he release me. I staggered backward, my wrists throbbing where his fingers had gripped. "What are you?" "Sit." He pointed to a wooden chair near the cold fireplace. "I don't." "Sit down, Maeve Silverlight, or this conversation will be significantly more difficult for both of us." Something in his tone made my legs obey before my brain could protest. I sank into the chair, my heart hammering against my ribs. Up close, Aaron was even more terrifying than he'd been in the hall. He filled the small room completely, all coiled muscle and barely restrained power. His eyes studied me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Do you know why I chose you?" His voice was quieter now, but no less commanding. "Because you've lost your mind?" The words escaped before I could stop them. His mouth twitched. It might have been amusement. "No. Because you're a bloodkey." I stared at him. "A what?" "Your bloodline, Maeve. Your real bloodline, not the deluded story your pack tells itself." He began to pace, his boots heavy against the stone floor. "Your grandmother was Alara Nightborn before she made it into the Silverlight family. And Alara's mother was descended from the first wolves, the ones who forged the original pack alliances and sealed them with blood magic." "That's just legend," I said, but my voice wavered. My grandmother had told me stories, whispered them in the dark when I was small, but I'd thought they were just tales to comfort a lonely child. "It's history." Aaron stopped pacing, fixed me with those pale gray eyes. "And it's the reason the Silvermane stronghold has been locked out of its own ancestral relics for 3 generations. We need someone with first wolf blood to access the vaults, to unlock the weapons and knowledge our enemies would kill to possess." The room felt suddenly colder. "So this isn't about, you don't actually want to mate." "I want survival," he said bluntly. "The rival packs are circling. The Iron Peak Alphas, the Northern Ridge Coalition, they all know we're vulnerable without access to our relics. If I don't secure them first, the Silvermane pack falls. Hundreds of wolves die, including you, whether you're part of my pack or not." I tried to process what he was saying, but my mind kept snagging on one detail. "Why didn't you just ask? Why claim me publicly like that?" "Because the relics respond to bonded pairs. Ancient magic requires ancient bonds." He crouched before my chair, bringing himself closer to eye level, though he still towered over me. "I need a mate with your bloodline, Maeve. And you need a way out of this pack that's been slowly killing you for 10 years. His words struck something deep and raw inside me. "They'll never accept this." The council will accept what I tell them to accept. I'm not some subordinate alpha begging for scraps at Theron's table. I'm offering you a choice." He leaned closer, and I could smell pine and smoke on him, wild and dangerous. "Come with me to the Silvermane stronghold. Undergo the trials of the bloodline to prove your worth to my council. Help me unlock the relics and secure my pack's future. In return, I'll give you power, protection, and a chance to clear your family's name. And if I say no, then you go back to that hall, and we both pretend this never happened. You continue your life as the cursed Omega nobody wants." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. But we both know how that story ends. He was right. I'd been dying slowly in this pack, suffocating under the weight of their hatred and my own powerlessness. This was a devil's bargain, a transaction dressed up as a fated mate bond. Aaron didn't want me, he wanted what I could unlock for him. But maybe that was better than being wanted for nothing at all. "The trials," I said slowly. "What are they?" "Tests of strength, strategy, and will. My council won't accept you simply because I claim you. You'll have to prove you're worthy of the Silvermane name." He straightened, offering me his hand. But I've seen wolves with less fire in their eyes conquer far worse. I looked at his outstretched hand, calloused and scarred, offering me either salvation or destruction. Behind me lay 10 years of shame and isolation. Before me lay trials I didn't understand for a pack I'd never met, with an alpha who saw me as a tool rather than a person. I took his hand. "Good," Aaron said, pulling me to my feet. We leave tonight. Pack light. Where we're going, you won't need anything from your old life. As he led me back toward the chaos of the Great Hall to make his formal declaration, I realized the truth of his words. My old life, such as it was, had just ended. Whatever came next would be forged in blood and trial and the cold pragmatism of an alpha who needed me to survive. I'd spent 10 years being powerless. Perhaps it was time to discover what power actually cost. Chapter 2. The Silvermane stronghold wasn't a home. It was a fortress carved into the mountainside, all black stone and iron gates, built to withstand sieges and survive winters that would kill lesser packs. We'd arrived 3 days ago, and I still hadn't seen all of it, just the cold chamber Aaron had assigned me, the drafty corridors patrolled by warriors who looked at me like I was a puzzle they wanted to solve with their claws, and now this, the training yard. It was an amphitheater of packed earth surrounded by tiered stone seating, open to the gray morning sky. 50 wolves had gathered to watch, their faces ranging from curious to openly hostile. The Silvermane Council sat in the highest tier, 7 ancient wolves whose approval I supposedly needed to earn. They looked like they'd rather watch me bleed. Aaron stood at the edge of the ring, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He told me this morning at dawn, the first trial began today. Physical dominance. Proof that I could survive in a pack where strength was currency and weakness was death. This is the Omega? A voice cut through the crowd's murmur. A massive beta stepped into the ring across from me, all coiled muscle and predatory grace. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe braid, and scars crisscrossed her bare arms like badges of honor. This is what our alpha brought home? I've seen pups with more meat on their bones. Laughter rippled through the crowd. My face burned, but I forced myself to stand straighter. Her name is Kira Blackthorn, Aaron said quietly, though somehow I heard him over the noise. Beta commander of my personal guard. She's killed 3 rival alphas in single combat. Don't expect mercy. Wonderful, I muttered. Kira circled me slowly, assessing. The rules are simple, little Omega. Make me yield or stay on your feet for 5 minutes. Do either and you pass. Fail, and you go back to whatever pathetic pack spawned you. She grinned, showing too many teeth. I'm hoping you fail. I didn't have time to respond. She lunged. Her fist caught me in the ribs, driving the air from my lungs. I stumbled backward, barely keeping my feet, and she was already there, sweeping my legs out from under me. I hit the ground hard, tasted dirt and blood. The crowd roared approval. Get up. The thought screamed through my pain. Get up or they'll never see you as anything but weak. I rolled to the side as Kira's boot slammed into the earth where my head had been. Scrambled to my feet, my ribs screaming protest. She was faster, stronger, better trained, everything I wasn't. But I'd spent 10 years surviving a pack that wanted me broken. I knew how to take a beating. She came at me again, and this time I managed to dodge, barely. Her follow-up caught me across the jaw, snapping my head sideways. Stars exploded across my vision. I staggered but didn't fall. Stay down, Kira growled. Save yourself the pain. Instead, I rushed her. It was stupid, reckless, exactly what she expected. Her knee drove into my stomach, doubling me over. But I'd gotten close enough to grab her arm, and I held on even as she tried to shake me off, even as her elbow slammed into my spine. Held on because letting go meant giving up, and I'd done that for too long already. She threw me. I hit the ground and rolled, came up coughing blood. 2 minutes had passed. 3 more to go. Kira's expression had changed. The mockery was gone, replaced by something colder. She approached methodically now, a predator who'd realized her prey had teeth. Her next strike came measured and precise, catching me in the temple. The world tilted, but I stayed on my feet through sheer stubbornness. I couldn't beat her. I'd known that from the start. But I could make her work for it. The next 3 minutes were an eternity of pain. Every breath was agony. Blood ran from my nose, my split lip, a cut above my eye. Kira landed blow after blow, and I absorbed them, deflected when I could, retreated when I had to. The crowd's noise faded to a distant roar. There was only the fight, the desperate need to stay standing, to prove I was more than the worthless Omega they all thought I was. For minutes. 4.5. Kira's fist came at my face, and I couldn't dodge fast enough. The impact sent me spinning, my knees buckling. I was going down, the ground rushing up to meet me. A horn blasted across the yard. I collapsed to my hands and knees, gasping, the world swimming around me. 5 minutes. I'd lasted 5 minutes. The silence was deafening. Then Kira's hand appeared in my vision, calloused and scarred. I looked up at her through the blood and swelling, and found something in her expression I hadn't expected. Respect. "You're tougher than you look, Omega," she said. Stupid, but tough. I took her hand, let her pull me to my feet. My legs barely held me, but I stood. Aaron was there suddenly, his massive presence steadying me when I swayed. "The first trial is complete," he announced to the crowd, to the council. "She stands." I'd lost the fight. I'd been beaten bloody and broken. But I'd survived. And in the Silvermane Pack, survival was its own kind of victory. In the stone seats above, even the hostile council members nodded slowly. They'd seen what they needed to see. Not strength, I didn't have that. Not skill, I barely had that either. They'd seen will. The refusal to quit even when quitting would have been easier. It was a start. Chapter 3. The healer had wrapped my ribs and stitched the cut above my eye, but 2 days later I still moved like an old woman. Every breath was a reminder of Kira's fists, every step a testament to how close I'd come to failure. But I'd survived the first trial, and that small victory sustained me as I navigated the labyrinth of Silvermane politics. Which was how I found myself outside the council chamber at midnight, pressed against the cold stone wall, listening to voices that weren't meant for my ears. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop. I'd been returning from the kitchen, sleep was impossible with my injuries, and I'd hoped warm milk might help, when I'd heard my name spoken in the unmistakable tone of conspiracy. "Cannot seriously expect us to accept her." That was Counselor Varen, his voice sharp with disdain. "She's a liability. Weak bloodline or not, she nearly failed the first trial. Aaron won't replace her." Another voice, deeper. "Counselor Thane. He's convinced she's the key to the relics. Then we convince him otherwise." A woman's voice, cold and calculating. "Counselor Morrigan. The Iron Peak delegation arrives tomorrow for the territorial negotiations. Use the girl. Expose her incompetence before the visiting alphas. Once Aaron sees how she embarrasses us on the political stage, he'll have no choice but to find another blood key." My blood ran cold. "And if he refuses?" Thane again, uncertain. "We've already made contact with her cousin, Lyra Silverlight. Same bloodline, stronger wolf. She arrives within the week." Morrigan's satisfaction was audible. "All we need is for tomorrow's negotiations to fail spectacularly. Aaron will see reason." Footsteps approached the door. I fled into the shadows, my heart hammering, my mind racing. They wanted me gone. Wanted to sabotage the negotiations and blame me for the failure. Wanted to replace me before I could prove my worth. I should have been terrified. Instead, I was furious. By dawn, I had a plan. The negotiations took place in the Stronghold's Grand Hall, a cavernous room lined with banners representing generations of Silvermane victories. Alpha Rothgar of Iron Peak sat across from Aaron, flanked by 3 of his own counselors. The air crackled with tension. These territories had been contested for decades, and one wrong word could reignite violence. I sat at Aaron's right hand, exactly where Counselor Morrigan had insisted I be placed. She wanted me visible, wanted my inevitable failure on full display. The council members watched me with barely concealed anticipation. "The eastern border," Rothgar began, his voice gravelly. "Your patrols have crossed into our hunting grounds twice this month. This aggression cannot stand." Aaron's expression darkened. "Your hunting grounds? That territory has belonged to Silvermane for—" "My alpha," I interrupted quietly. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to me. Aaron's jaw tightened in warning, but I pressed on. Perhaps we're approaching this incorrectly. I looked directly at Hrothgar. Alpha, when did your pack last hunt successfully in the Eastern Valley? Hrothgar frowned. 3 weeks ago. Why does that matter? Because we haven't hunted there in 6 weeks. I unfolded a map I'd spent the night preparing, stolen from the Stronghold's archives. The Eastern Valley's elk migration has shifted south this season. Neither pack is hunting there successfully anymore. We're fighting over territory that's currently worthless to both of us. Counselor Morrigan leaned forward, her voice honey-sweet. Maeve, dear, perhaps you should leave the negotiations to those with experience. Let her speak. Aaron's voice was quiet, but absolute. I met Hrothgar's eyes. The elk are moving through the southern ridge now. It's unclaimed territory, too difficult for either pack to hold alone. But if we established a joint hunting ground, shared the resources equally, both our packs eat well this winter. And the Eastern Valley? I traced the map with my finger. We formalize it as a neutral buffer zone. No patrols, no hunting, no conflict. You're suggesting we cooperate? Hrothgar's counselor scoffed. Iron Peak doesn't share prey. No, I said calmly. I'm suggesting you survive the winter. Your pack's numbers have grown. So have ours. The old hunting grounds can't sustain us both anymore. We can fight over scraps, or we can adapt. I'd spent the night reading every territorial report I could find, memorizing migration patterns and resource surveys. The council had wanted to expose my incompetence. Instead, I'd found a solution to a problem no one else had bothered to solve. Hrothgar studied the map, then studied me. Where did you find this data? Your own pack's hunting logs from last year. They're public record at the autumn gathering. I kept my voice steady. The pattern's been shifting for 3 seasons. Everyone's been too busy fighting to notice. A long silence stretched between the alphas. Finally, Hrothgar laughed, a rough, surprised sound. Aaron, where did you find this one? She's got more sense than half your council combined. I didn't look at Counselor Morrigan, but I felt her fury like heat across my skin. The Omega makes a compelling argument, Hrothgar continued. I'll agree to joint hunting rights on the Southern Ridge. 1-season trial. If it works, we formalize the treaty. Aaron's hand found mine under the table, squeezed once. Agreed. The negotiations continued, but the crucial moment had passed. I'd turned a planned disaster into a diplomatic victory. When the Iron Peak delegation finally left, promises of cooperation replacing threats of war, Counselor Morrigan's expression could have curdled milk. That night, Aaron found me on the battlements, staring out at the mountains. You knew, he said without preamble, about the council's plot. I overheard them. And instead of coming to me, you decided to outmaneuver them publicly. He sounded almost amused. Dangerous strategy. So, is trying to survive in a pack that wants me gone. I turned to face him. They'll try again. Let them. His pale eyes caught the moonlight. Today you proved you're not just a bloodkey, Maeve. You're a strategist. The council fears what they can't control. He paused. You're starting to become uncontrollable. It should have sounded like a warning. Instead, it felt like permission. 2 trials down. 3 more to go. And I was learning that survival wasn't enough anymore. I wanted to win. Chapter 4. The vault entrance had been sealed for 70 years, hidden behind a stone wall in the deepest chamber of the stronghold. It took 4 of Aaron's strongest warriors to move the rubble that generations had allowed to accumulate, and when the dust finally settled, we stood before a door that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of obsidian. Ancient runes covered every inch of its surface, glowing faintly with a light that had no source. This is the second trial, Aaron said, his voice echoing in the cavern. Behind us, the council had gathered, along with Kira and a handful of senior warriors. They all watched me with varying degrees of skepticism. Beyond this door lies the first of the ancestral relics. Weapons forged by the first wolves, imbued with magic we've lost the knowledge to recreate. But the door won't open for just anyone. I stepped closer, studying the runes. They seemed to shift and writhe under my gaze, never quite staying still long enough to read. 3 generations of alphas have tried to solve this riddle, Counselor Varen said from behind me, his tone dripping with false sympathy. All of them stronger, smarter, more experienced than you. Don't feel inadequate when you fail. I ignored him, pressing my palm against the cold obsidian. The moment my skin made contact, the runes blazed brilliant white, and a voice filled my head, ancient, feminine, speaking words I shouldn't understand but somehow did. The strong break what they cannot bend. The wise know when to yield. What is the warrior's greatest weapon? The riddle echoed through my mind, and I knew instinctively that I had only one chance to answer. One mistake, and the door would remain sealed for another generation. What does it say? Aaron asked quietly. It's asking a question. I kept my hand on the door, feeling the thrum of ancient magic beneath my fingertips. The warrior's greatest weapon. What is it? Their strength, Kira said immediately. Has to be. Their cunning, offered another warrior. Counselor Morrigan's voice cut through the suggestions. This is pointless. The girl doesn't have the lineage to. She has exactly the lineage required, Aaron interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. Maeve, what do you think? I closed my eyes, letting the words wash over me again. The strong break what they cannot bend. The wise know when to yield. It wasn't asking about physical weapons or tactical advantages. The first wolves had been strategic thinkers, pack builders, politicians as much as warriors. It's not strength, I said slowly. And it's not cunning. Those are tools, not weapons. I thought about my grandmother's stories, the tales she'd whispered about wolves who'd united fractured packs and built alliances that lasted centuries. The first wolves didn't conquer through force alone. They built something that outlasted them. The answer crystallized in my mind with sudden clarity. Restraint, I said, opening my eyes. The warrior's greatest weapon is restraint. Knowing when not to fight. When to yield, when to negotiate, when to show mercy. Any wolf can be strong. Any wolf can be clever. But it takes real power to choose not to use your strength when you could. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the runes exploded with light so bright I had to shield my eyes. The obsidian door groaned, a sound like the earth itself shifting, and slowly, impossibly, it swung open. The silence behind me was absolute. Cool air rushed from the vault beyond, carrying the scent of age and metal and something else, something that made my wolf stir restlessly under my skin. The chamber beyond glowed with the same ethereal light as the runes, illuminating rows of weapons mounted on stone pedestals. Swords, axes, bows, each one radiating power that I could feel even from the doorway. Impossible, Counselor Varen breathed. She actually. Not impossible. Aaron moved past me, his hand briefly touching my shoulder. Inevitable. This is why I chose her. He stepped into the vault, and the ancient magic seemed to recognize him, the light growing warmer. Maeve, come. You've earned the right to see what you've unlocked. I followed him into the chamber, acutely aware of the council filing in behind us, their earlier smugness replaced by uneasy awe. The weapons were beautiful, each one a masterwork of craft and magic, but Aaron led me past them to the far wall where a single pedestal stood empty. This held the blade of the first alpha, he explained, his voice low. It was moved to the second vault centuries ago, along with the true power of our pack. The healing stones, the territorial wards, the knowledge that made us unbreakable. He turned to face me. One vault opened. 2 more remain. I studied the empty pedestal, the runes carved into its base. How many alphas tried to open this door? 12 over 3 generations. My grandfather. My father. Myself, twice. His pale eyes met mine. All of us answered with strength or strategy. None of us understood what the first wolves were really asking. They were asking if we'd learned anything. I traced the runes with my finger, feeling their power hum beneath my touch. All this power, all these weapons, they're useless if we only know how to destroy. The first wolves knew that. They built something that would only open for someone who understood restraint. A safeguard, Kira said from the doorway, her voice thoughtful. Against their own descendants becoming tyrants. I turned to find her watching me with an expression I was starting to recognize, respect mixed with something like reassessment. Behind her, even Counselor Morrigan looked shaken. Aaron's hand found the small of my back, a gesture of possession and partnership both. The third trial will be different, he said quietly, meant only for my ears. The council will insist on it. They're starting to fear you almost as much as they fear losing me. Good, I whispered back. Let them fear me. His mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. You're learning, Maeve Silverlight. 3 trials down. And with each one, I felt less like the rejected Omega I'd been and more like someone I'd never imagined I could become. Someone dangerous. Someone powerful. Someone who might actually survive this. Chapter 5. The nightmares came on the 4th night after opening the vault. I woke gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat, the phantom smell of smoke filling my lungs. The fire. Always the fire. My father's screams, the elders burning, and my 12-year-old self standing frozen while my world collapsed into ash and accusation. I couldn't go back to sleep. Couldn't stay in that room with its stone walls pressing in like a tomb. So I found myself climbing the spiral stairs to the battlements, seeking the cold night air and the vast emptiness of the mountain sky. I didn't expect to find Aaron already there. He stood at the far edge, hands braced on the stone merlin, staring out at the darkness beyond the stronghold. For once, he wasn't surrounded by warriors or counselors or the weight of command. He was just a man, alone with whatever thoughts kept him awake at this hour. I should have left. Should have given him his privacy. Instead, I found myself walking toward him, my bare feet silent on the cold stone. Can't sleep either? I asked quietly. He didn't startle. Didn't turn. The dead are loud tonight. I stopped beside him, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his massive frame. You have nightmares too. Everyone who's lived long enough has them. His voice was rough, tired in a way I'd never heard before. The difference is, most people's nightmares stay in their heads. Mine become reality if I make the wrong choice. I followed his gaze out into the darkness, toward the territories beyond our borders where rival packs circled like wolves around wounded prey. The council thinks I'm a liability. That I'll get you killed. The council thinks everyone is a liability except themselves. He finally looked at me, and in the moonlight his pale eyes seemed almost silver. You opened a vault that defeated my father. That defeated me. They're not worried you'll get me killed. They're worried you'll make me expendable. The words hit me harder than I expected. I'm not trying to take anything from you. I know. He turned fully toward me, and I realized how close we were standing. Close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. But power doesn't care about intentions, Maeve. You have a gift for seeing solutions where others see only problems. For understanding what the ancients meant when they built these safeguards. That's dangerous to people who've spent their lives believing strength is the only currency that matters. Is that what you believe? The question came out smaller than I intended. That strength is all that matters? His hand came up slowly, giving me time to retreat if I wanted, and brushed a strand of auburn hair from my face. The gesture was shockingly gentle from someone so brutal. I used to. Then I watched you take a beating from my best warrior and refused to stay down. Watched you turn a diplomatic disaster into an alliance. Watched you solve a riddle that made fools of 12 alphas. His thumb traced my cheekbone, Featherlight. Strength matters. But you're teaching me it's not the only thing that does. My breath caught. This wasn't part of the bargain we'd made. This wasn't the cold transaction he'd offered in that antechamber 3 weeks ago. This was something else entirely, something dangerous in a different way. Aaron. I'm not asking you for anything, he said quietly. I know what we agreed. A political alliance, nothing more. You help me secure the relics, I help you clear your name. Clean. Simple. Strategic. Then why does it feel more complicated? The words escaped before I could stop them. Because you're not what I expected. His hand dropped from my face, but he didn't step back. I thought I was choosing a key, a tool to unlock what I needed and nothing more. But you're not a tool, Maeve. He stopped, something vulnerable flickering across his expression before he locked it down. You're something I didn't plan for. The air between us felt charged, electric. I should step back. Should remind us both that this was business, that feelings would only complicate what was already dangerously fragile. But I was tired of doing what I should do. What happened to them? I asked instead. The dead you carry. The ones who are allowed tonight. His jaw tightened. For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my brother. Kale. He was supposed to be alpha, not me. Stronger, smarter, everything father wanted. But when the Iron Peak pack attacked 5 years ago, someone had to hold the southern ridge while the civilians evacuated. His voice went flat, distant. He held it. Killed 30 warriors before they finally brought him down. By the time I reached him, he was already gone. I'm sorry, I said, because what else was there to say? He died because I was too slow to see the attack coming. Too focused on politics to notice the raiders circling. His hands clenched on the stone. I swore I'd never let politics blind me again. That I'd do whatever it took to keep this pack safe, even if it meant making choices others found cruel or pragmatic or cold. Like claiming an Omega you didn't want for her bloodline. I understood now the weight he carried. You weren't being cruel. You were being strategic. I was being a coward. The admission came out harsh. A braver man would have found another way. A better man wouldn't have dragged you into this knowing the council would try to destroy you. I reached out without thinking, my hand covering his on the stone. His skin was rough, scarred from 100 battles. A different man would have let me rot in my old pack. You gave me a chance to be more than what they made me. That's not cowardice, Aaron. I didn't know how to finish that sentence. Didn't know what this was becoming between us. His hand turned beneath mine, his fingers threading through my own. The gesture was simple, intimate, terrifying. 3 more trials, he said quietly. After that, you'll have fulfilled your end of the bargain. You can leave if you want. Go anywhere, be anyone. I'll make sure the council can't touch you. And if I don't want to leave? The question hung between us, heavy with implications neither of us was ready to name. Then we figure out what comes next. His thumb stroked over my knuckles. Together. We stood there on the battlements as the night deepened around us, hands intertwined, neither of us speaking. The political pact we'd made was cracking, transforming into something neither of us had planned for. Something real. And that terrified me more than any trial ever could. Chapter 6. They left me in the Blackthorn Forest at dawn with nothing but the clothes on my back and a single instruction: survive 3 days, or don't come back at all. Kira had been the one to deliver me to the forest's edge, her expression unreadable. The wilderness doesn't care about your politics or your clever words, she'd said. Out here, you're just another wolf trying not to die. Prove you can survive on instinct alone, and the council will have no choice but to accept you. Then she turned and left, and I was alone. The Blackthorn Forest was ancient, untamed territory that even the Silvermane pack avoided. The trees grew so thick that sunlight barely penetrated the canopy, and the undergrowth was a tangle of thorns and roots designed to trip and tear. Somewhere in this wilderness were predators that didn't care that I was pack, didn't care that I'd opened ancient vaults or solved impossible riddles. Out here, I was prey. The first day passed in a haze of careful navigation and growing hunger. I found a stream, drank carefully, tried to remember everything my father had taught me about wilderness survival before he died. Stay alert. Conserve energy. Don't panic. By nightfall, I'd managed to catch 2 fish with my bare hands and start a fire using friction and dried moss. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. I ate the fish half raw, too hungry to wait for them to cook properly, and tried to ignore the sounds of things moving in the darkness beyond my fire's light. The second day, everything changed. I was tracking a rabbit through dense undergrowth when the pain hit. It started in my chest, a burning pressure that felt like my ribs were cracking from the inside out. I collapsed to my knees, gasping, my vision swimming with black spots. This wasn't hunger. This wasn't exhaustion. This was my wolf trying to emerge, and something was fighting to keep her caged. I'd never had a strong shift. My wolf had always been small, weak, a source of shame that confirmed my Omega status. But now, as agony tore through my body, I felt something else beneath the pain. Something vast and ancient and furious that my wolf had been suppressed for so long. The memories came in fragments, sharp as broken glass. My grandmother, whispering prayers over me when I was 5. The council elder who'd tested my strength and declared me Omega, his hands glowing with a light I'd been too young to understand. My father's face, tight with grief and resignation, as he accepted their verdict. They'd bound my wolf. Suppressed her with magic because a girl with first wolf blood running strong was too dangerous, too powerful, too much of a threat to the established order. My Omega status had been a lie. The rage that realization brought was enough to shatter whatever binding remained. I felt it break like chains snapping, felt my wolf surge forward with a force that drove me to the ground. The shift came violent and agonizing, my bones reshaping, my senses exploding into overwhelming clarity. When it was over, I stood on 4 legs in a body I'd never truly inhabited before. I wasn't small. I wasn't weak. I was massive, nearly the size of an alpha, with silver-white fur that seemed to glow in the forest's dim light. My senses were so sharp it was almost painful. I could hear a mouse breathing 30 feet away, smell the difference between fear and aggression on the wind, feel the vibration of paws on earth from half a mile distant. This was what they'd feared. This was what they'd stolen from me. A growl built in my chest, primal and furious. For 10 years, I'd believed I was broken. For 10 years, I'd accepted their judgment, their cruelty, their dismissal. And all of it had been built on a lie designed to keep me powerless. I ran. The forest blurred around me as I pushed my new body to its limits, reveling in the strength I'd never been allowed to feel. I was fast, faster than I'd ever imagined possible. Strong enough to leap obstacles that would have stopped my old, suppressed wolf. The rabbit I'd been tracking earlier didn't stand a chance. I brought it down in seconds, my instincts sharp and sure. For the first time in my life, I felt complete. The 3rd day, I didn't just survive. I hunted. I claimed territory. I marked my presence in a way that made the local predators give me a wide berth. When Kira returned at sunset to find me, I was standing in my human form beside a fire, cooking the deer I'd brought down that afternoon. She stopped at the tree line, her eyes widening as she took in my appearance. Something about me had changed, and we both knew it. "You shifted," she said, and there was no question in her voice. Fully shifted. I did. I met her gaze steadily. Turns out I was never an Omega at all. Someone made sure I believed I was. Kira's expression darkened with understanding. The council. The old council. From my original pack. I stood, and even in human form I felt different. Taller. Stronger. Dangerous. They bound my wolf when I was a child. Made sure I'd never be a threat to their power structure. And now the binding's broken. Kira studied me with new respect, and something else. Wariness. Aaron needs to know. Aaron, I said slowly, is going to have an interesting conversation with his council about what they're really afraid of. Because I understood now. They hadn't feared I was too weak for Aaron. They'd feared I might be too strong. That I might challenge not just their authority, but the entire hierarchy they'd built their power on. They'd been right to fear. As I followed Kira back toward the stronghold, my wolf settled contentedly beneath my skin, no longer caged, no longer silenced. I'd passed the trial of survival. But I'd discovered something far more dangerous than endurance. I'd discovered who I really was. And there was no going back from that. Chapter 7. The attack came at dawn, when the stronghold was still rubbing sleep from its eyes and the morning patrol had just departed. I was in the training yard, testing my new strength against practice dummies, when the warning horn split the air with 3 sharp blasts. Raiders. The southern gate. I didn't think. I ran toward the sound of steel meeting steel, toward the screams and the scent of blood that my enhanced senses picked up before I'd even cleared the courtyard. By the time I reached the gate, chaos had already taken root. 20 warriors in unfamiliar colors, ire peak markings, but darker, corrupted somehow, were pushing through our defenses like a blade through cloth. And at the center of it all, Aaron fought like a force of nature incarnate. He moved with brutal efficiency, his great sword carving through attackers, his presence alone enough to rally the scattered Silvermane warriors. But something was wrong. The enemy Alpha leading the charge was too fast, too coordinated, and when he drove his blade toward Aaron's exposed side, I saw the trap too late to shout a warning. The steel caught Aaron just below the ribs. Not deep enough to kill, but deep enough to matter. I watched him stagger, watched his defense falter, watched the enemy Alpha grin with triumph as he raised his weapon for a killing blow. My wolf exploded to the surface without permission. The shift came faster than thought, and I was moving before my paws hit the ground. The enemy Alpha barely had time to register the blur of silver-white fur before I collided with him, my momentum driving him away from Aaron and into the stone wall with bone-crushing force. He tried to bring his weapon up, but I was already inside his guard, my jaws closing around his sword arm. The crack of breaking bone was audible even over the battle's din. He screamed. I didn't let go. Fall back. Someone was shouting, panic threading through the command. The enemy warriors were retreating, dragging their wounded Alpha with them as they fled toward the forest. I pursued for 50 yards, making sure they understood the cost of return, before circling back to where Aaron had collapsed against the gate. Kira was already there, her hands pressed against his wound, her face tight with fear I'd never seen her wear. The stronghold's warriors had formed a protective circle, but they looked lost, rudderless. Their Alpha was bleeding, their chain of command shattered. I shifted back to human form, ignoring my nakedness and the way every eye turned toward me. Kira, get him to the healers. Now. My voice came out harder than I'd ever heard it, carrying command that made her move without question. I pointed to the nearest warrior, double the gate guard. No one in or out without my clearance. You 3, track those raiders, but don't engage. I want to know where they're going and how many more there are. You can't just, a council guard started to protest. I just killed their Alpha, I said flatly. Aaron is wounded. Someone needs to give orders, and right now, I'm the one standing. I met his eyes, let him see the wolf that now burned freely in mine. Do you want to challenge that? He looked away first. For the next 6 hours, I held the stronghold together through sheer will and improvisation. I organized patrols, reinforced defenses, personally interviewed every wolf who'd witnessed the attack. The raiders had been testing our strength, probing for weaknesses. They'd found Aaron vulnerable and struck hard. They wouldn't make that mistake again. When Aaron finally woke in the healing chamber that evening, his first words were rough. Did we hold? We held, I said quietly. I was sitting beside his bed, still wearing borrowed clothes, exhaustion pulling at every muscle. Your warriors followed orders. The stronghold is secure. His pale eyes found mine, reading something there that made his expression shift. You took command. Someone had to. The council. Can argue about it later. I leaned forward, my hand finding his. Right now, you need to heal. Let me worry about the rest. His fingers tightened around mine, and in his gaze I saw something that made my chest constrict. Pride. Trust. And beneath it all, something deeper that neither of us had words for yet. Maeve, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You're not my tool anymore. No, I agreed. I'm not. I was something far more dangerous. I was his equal. And the council would have to accept that or break against it. Chapter 8. The ancestral altar lay 3 miles beneath the stronghold, carved into living stone by the first wolves themselves. The descent took an hour through passages so narrow I had to turn sideways in places, following Aaron's labored breathing and the flickering torch Kira carried ahead of us. He shouldn't have been walking, shouldn't have been anywhere except the healing chamber, but the moment our scouts reported enemy forces massing for a full assault, there had been no choice. "They're coming for the relics," he'd said, blood still seeping through his bandages. "If they breach the stronghold before we secure them, everything we've fought for dies." Now we stood before a door that made the obsidian vault look like child's play. It was carved from pure white stone that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, covered in runes so complex they made my eyes water. Behind us, the council had gathered, even they understood the stakes. Beyond this door lay the true power of the Silvermane Pack, weapons that could turn the tide of any war, healing stones that could save hundreds, and the territorial wards that would make our borders impenetrable. The door needed two things to open: first wolf blood and a bonded pair. I felt Aaron's presence behind me, his hand settling on my shoulder. We weren't truly bonded, not in the traditional sense. Our alliance had been born from necessity, grown into something resembling partnership, complicated by emotions neither of us had planned for. But as his palm pressed against mine on the door's surface, I felt something click into place. Not magic, but recognition. Two wolves who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate desperations and built something stronger than either had been alone. The door recognized it too. Light exploded from beneath our joined hands, spreading across the runes like wildfire. The voice that filled my mind this time was deeper, masculine, ancient beyond comprehension. "What do you bring to those who come after?" I understood immediately. The first wolves hadn't just been protecting their relics from the unworthy, they'd been testing whether each generation had learned the lessons written in blood and survival. The previous trials had asked about restraint, about wisdom, about primal strength. This one asked the only question that truly mattered: what legacy would we leave? "Hope," I said aloud, for everyone to hear. "We bring hope that tomorrow's wolves will be better than today's. That they'll inherit not just our weapons and our territory, but our hard-won knowledge that true strength lies in unity, not domination." The door opened with a sound like singing. The chamber beyond took my breath away. It was vast, a cathedral carved from crystal that reflected our torchlight into 1,000 dancing colors. Pedestals lined the walls, each one holding relics that hummed with barely contained power. But it was the altar at the chamber's center that drew my attention, a pool of liquid silver that rippled despite the still air, fed by some source I couldn't see. "The blood well," Aaron breathed. I thought it was a myth. Counselor Morrigan stepped forward, her usual hostility replaced by something like reverence. "Anyone who drinks from it gains the strength of the first wolves. But it requires a sacrifice, something precious given freely." The distant sound of battle horns reached us even here, muffled but unmistakable. The enemy had reached our gates. Time was running out. I looked at Aaron, saw the same understanding in his eyes that I felt in my bones. We'd come too far, sacrificed too much, to hesitate now. Together, we approached the altar. Together, we each cut our palms and let our blood fall into the silver pool. The blood well erupted with light that burned away the last of our pretense. When it faded, we were changed stronger, faster, bound together in ways that transcended any ceremony. The relics around us pulsed in recognition, acknowledging their new guardians. Above us, the stronghold needed saving. And we had just become the weapons to do it. Chapter 9. The battle raged above us, but in the crystal chamber beneath the stronghold, something more fundamental was being forged. The Bloodwell's power thrummed through my veins like lightning, reshaping everything I'd believed about strength and dominance. Beside me, Aaron swayed on his feet, his wound forgotten, his eyes blazing with the same silver fire I felt burning in my own. "We need to move," Kira urged from the doorway. "The southern wall won't hold much longer." But I couldn't move yet. The Bloodwell had shown me something in that moment. Our blood merged, a vision of what the Silvermane Pack had been versus what it had become. The first wolves hadn't built their strength on domination and fear. They'd built it on mutual protection, on wolves lifting each other up rather than crushing the weak beneath their boots. They'd built it on the principle my old pack had violated when they bound my wolf and left me to rot. Maeve. Aaron's hand found mine, steadying me. Through our new bond, I felt his confusion, his concern, and beneath it all, an unwavering trust that stole my breath. The hierarchy, I said, my voice carrying through the chamber with newfound authority. It's broken. That's why we're vulnerable. That's why the enemy thinks they can take us. I turned to face the council members who'd followed us down. Even Counselor Morrigan looked shaken by what she'd witnessed. The first wolves never designated Omegas as lesser. That came later, when Alphas grew afraid of wolves who had power they couldn't control through brute force. This is hardly the time for philosophy, Counselor Varen snapped, but his protest lacked its usual venom. It's exactly the time, Aaron said, his voice rough but certain. Through our bond, I felt him understanding what I'd seen, accepting it as truth. We've been fighting with half our pack's potential locked away. How many wolves like Maeve have we dismissed as weak when we should have been asking why their strength was hidden? I met Kira's eyes across the chamber. She stood straighter, something fierce and hopeful kindling in her expression. What are you proposing? A new law, I said simply. No wolf will be designated as lesser based on size or initial strength alone. No wolf will have their abilities suppressed or bound without clear evidence of danger to the pack. And any wolf, alpha, beta, or omega, who proves their worth through the trials we've established will have an equal voice in how this pack is run. The silence that followed was profound. You're describing chaos, Counselor Morrigan said, but her tone held more curiosity than contempt now. The pack needs structure. Order. We'll have structure, Aaron countered. But it will be earned through merit, not birth. Through wisdom and strength combined, not one or the other. His hand tightened around mine. Maeve opened vaults I couldn't touch. She commanded warriors who wouldn't listen to me wounded. She survived trials that broke stronger wolves. And she did it all while everyone told her she was worthless. His voice dropped, turned dangerous. How many other wolves have we wasted because we were too blind to see their potential? The stronghold shuddered above us, reminding us that philosophy meant nothing if we didn't survive the next hour. But as we gathered the relics and made our way back through the narrow passages, I felt something shift in the warriors around me. The way they looked at me had changed. Not with contempt or pity or even just respect. They looked at me like I was pack. When we emerged into the chaos of battle, Aaron and I moved as one, the Bloodwell's power flowing between us like a living thing. Every warrior we touched felt it too, the strength we'd unlocked, the potential we'd freed. The enemy broke against us like waves against stone, and when the sun finally set on our victory, the Silvermane pack stood transformed. I was no longer the rejected Omega who'd walked into a mating ceremony expecting humiliation. I was the Alpha's equal, his partner in truth, and the architect of a new order that would ensure no wolf ever suffered as I had. The goddess hadn't chosen me for love. She'd chosen me for revolution.